You are listening to Season 4 of Celebrating Simple Life, the podcast. I'm Kimberly Evans, and I'm so happy you are here. After planning events and working in the marketing industry with so many incredible clients and entrepreneurs for almost 20 years, along with personally experiencing hardship in life and business, I've discovered how powerful our mindset and purpose is in creating a life of joy and celebration while having a whole lot of fun along the way. Join me with a coffee or cocktail as I connect with inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, tastemakers, and extraordinary people as they share their journey in life and business and how they are striving to live a life of purpose. Your fears and beliefs in yourself will be transformed as you work towards creating the best version of yourself from the inside out. You're in good company. Cheers to celebrating simple life. Today on Celebrating Simple Life, the podcast, I'm talking all about the power of communication, boundaries, and learning to ask for what you need. And wow, is this all too familiar for me in my life. There have been so many examples in my own life, in conversations I've had with people in the last few weeks, and they all keep coming back to communication and how communication and boundaries are ultimately what allows us to experience the most joy and the most anger, stress, and resentment. And I just felt like I would be remiss if I wasn't bringing this up as a topic today, because I always want the topics on this podcast to be life-changing, inspiring, and practical, where you feel like you can take nuggets from each episode and apply them to your own life in order for you to be better shaping your own world, your own identity, in order for you to be able to show up in the best way that you possibly can in your life and business, family, relationships. And today I feel like this is the mother load. So if you are driving in your car right now, or sitting in your office, or doing whatever, I feel like this is going to be an episode where you are going to want a pen and paper, because the lessons that have been flying at me from so many sources in the last few weeks are all coming to you right here, right now. So, communication. I feel like this obviously is such a broad topic, and there's no possible way to sum up communication and boundaries in one podcast episode. But I wanted to just dive in a little bit today in the aspect of communication and boundaries in being able to learn how to ask for what you need. Now, this has been something that I have struggled with my entire life and has been a work in progress. And I would definitely say that I have come a long way in the last 5-10 years in this, but it is constantly something that I am learning every single day. And it feels almost like one step forward, 10 steps back on this topic for me, because asking for what you need feels hard. And the more I learn and the more I research about this, I don't know why it has to be so hard, and why we, and I will put us women in a different category than the men that are listening. It seems to be something that we feel as women that we need permission in order to ask for what we need. And if we don't have that permission, we should just suck it up and be okay with the anger and resentment and bad feelings that come from not actually getting our needs met. And this cycle just continues on and on and on. And I have been so guilty of that in so many different scenarios in my life, where I will be frustrated about something and almost put the point of blame on my partner or my kids or somebody else who was involved in the communication, and allowing their actions to be what I get to blame my frustration and anger on. And sure, maybe it's valid. Maybe they did something that was really hurtful, and sure, I can be upset. But ultimately, my reaction and my allowing of those things to happen more than once is on me. That's something that I need to clean up on my boundary end, so that the people around me know what is and isn't acceptable. And I need to change habits on my own end in order to prevent these things from triggering me. And this is a lot easier to say than to do, and I speak from personal experience here in this, but communication and boundary settings, honestly, is what brings us joy and what brings us frustration. And so I think that if we can dive into this a little bit today and actually get us understanding what our own boundaries are, what even is a boundary, and how do we create these in a place of love and of assertiveness, which are all positive attributes, versus creating them out of a place of anger and confrontation and sort of coming back to somebody else in a really negative and often inappropriate way in order to get our needs met. How can we do this in a more healthy way that comes from a positive place, which often, I would say 99% of the time, allows change to happen a lot quicker when things are happening in an amicable, positive way, rather than coming at it from a place of anger and thinking that raising our voices and shouting and yelling are going to get anything done. I know it sure hasn't worked for me in the past, and I'm sure you probably feel the same. So I stumbled upon an episode recently of the For the Love podcast with Jen Hatmaker, whom I just adore. She, I feel like, knows how to read my inner thoughts while she is speaking in her podcast. And everything she says, I just can relate to so much. I don't know, maybe it's because we're the same Enneagram, and hopefully someday I will be able to connect with her in real life, because I just admire the way she shows up so authentically and isn't afraid to say things like it is and takes care of herself in that and doesn't apologize for how maybe it affects other people, because everybody has to create their own boundaries and their own life for themselves. So Jen Hatmaker was interviewing therapist Nedra Glover Tawwab, and their insight, honestly, it was like they were just taking a page straight out of my brain. If you want to jump over and listen to that podcast after this, I would highly recommend it, because it was just filled with so many nuggets of wisdom that had been floating around in my mind, but just brought to the forefront in just such a insightful way by Nedra, with her therapy background and just doing this for a living with couples and relationships and business, and just helping people figure out what their own boundaries are in order to live a better life. So I feel like I've almost been in a boundary crisis for the past while. And this is prior to COVID even, but definitely being through this pandemic has changed what some of my boundaries are. And it's almost blurred the lines a little bit from being at home more to maybe not having quite the same kind of schedule. And now more recently, as I've started working out of the home, it's kind of just brought me back to having to rethink about what my values and what my boundaries are in order to help shape how I want my life to look and how I can show up for others and the ways that others can show up for me in the best way possible. I think these are things that we need to know about ourselves. And if that feels blurry and we don't know that about ourselves, I think that's when a lot of miscommunication can happen, because we haven't actually verbalized some of these things to the people that we are communicating with. I think it's easy to sometimes assume that everybody around us knows what we're thinking and what we're feeling, because we have those thoughts and feelings going through our minds all the time. And I for sure have been guilty of this, where I make an assumption that this person should know how I feel about this, and the fact that they don't means that they don't respect me, or they don't care about me, or were they even listening when I was talking to them? And all of these things come back, and it usually comes down to the fact that I haven't actually clearly communicated what I need in this situation, but am making the assumption that this person knows what I need. And then when they don't respond in the way that I was assuming they would, based on what I thought they knew about me, I'm frustrated. And so if you are relating to this at all, or if you are feeling like maybe this is bringing up some uncomfortable feelings for you, or you're thinking, oh, yeah, I feel disrespected, I feel frustrated, then keep listening on, because I don't believe that this is how we are supposed to show up. I don't believe that we were meant to feel triggered and angry and frustrated and resentful with the people around us. To me, that is the sign of something deeper going on that needs to be dug into. And that does not mean that being triggered and feeling uncomfortable and frustrated or angry is necessarily going to stop. What it means is when that happens, it means pressing pause and actually being willing to dig into why you're feeling that way. Why is this triggering you? Why are you feeling frustrated by this? What did this person say or not say that is causing you to tell yourself a story in your mind about what you're assuming is happening here? And how can you clearly articulate in a kind and generous way what you need, rather than flipping the switch and coming at it from the attack and immediately getting frustrated? You don't know me at all. Why would you say that to me? You know that I don't need this right now. Those are all things I personally have definitely had conversations, especially with my partner, about this in. And I find that I get to that place with my partner and my kids to a certain degree as well. But then I somehow blur the lines between other family members, friends, colleagues at work, business associates, people that I collaborate with, and almost take it to the opposite, where I would rather just appease the situation, keep the peace to my own detriment, and allow things to go on so that I don't make anybody else uncomfortable, and I'll hold all of the uncomfortableness on myself in order for a situation to just move forward and not actually dig into something that maybe isn't actually serving either of you very well. So, our honest and clear communication is our responsibility. We have to stop assuming that anybody around us can possibly know what it is that we're thinking. And I think sometimes that it almost gets a bit blurry, especially if you're somebody that processes a lot in your head. I know my partner is somebody that processes almost everything in his head and really doesn't say a lot out loud. And that has caused a lot of issues in our communication, because not blaming him for it, but it causes issues on my end because I make assumptions that aren't necessarily true. When he hasn't said something out loud, I start telling myself a story of dialogue that I'm assuming he's thinking. And the cycle just sort of continues with, I'm already frustrated about something in my head that I'm making a story up about, and it hasn't actually even happened yet. He's thinking it in his own mind and hasn't processed it enough to feel like he can say it out loud. Are you with me on this? Does anybody else do this with their partner or in relationships in their life? I sure hope so, because this is something that really has caused a lot of issues for us, because we don't communicate the same way at all. And it isn't healthy to make up stories about a situation when you actually don't really know what the other person is thinking. And we can't blame someone else for something that stresses us out, something that's making us feel overwhelmed, when it's our responsibility to ask for what we need. And I have done this so many times, and I'm tired. I'm tired of feeling stressed out and overwhelmed. I'm tired of little things triggering me and feeling like things feel out of control around me. And that's a whole nother topic, control. We'll dig into that on another episode, but I wanted to just dive into how communication leads to setting clear boundaries. What even is a boundary? And how do we actually press pause in moments in our day where we give ourselves a moment to actually come up with the right thing to say that serves us in that moment, rather than saying yes to something that you really wanted to say no to, rather than getting mad at somebody for not following an invisible boundary that you have never actually said out loud. So, the definition of a boundary from Webster's dictionary is a line that marks the limit of an area. And I love that. I love that definition because that is exactly what it is. A boundary is a line. There are places in the world and in life where there are actual physical boundaries of something that can and cannot happen. There are rules and regulations that are invisible and transparent, to be able to see right in front of you every single day that we just naturally accept around us. We see a red light and we stop. There, most of the time, isn't an actual physical human being or spikes that jump up across the road that actually stop your vehicle if you are making the decision to not stop at a red light. But we all know the consequences of what happens when somebody runs a red light, or the potential consequences that could happen. An accident, you might get a ticket. You could really cause some serious damage, not necessarily to yourself, but to other vehicles that are a part of you making the decision to not obey the traffic rules. And these are all rules that are just out there. They are rules that everybody, everywhere that has traffic lights follows. And sure, there might be some people that don't necessarily agree on how these are operated, but everybody follows these rules to a certain degree because they know that that is helping the better good stay safe, including ourselves. So when we're looking at a line that marks the limit of an area, these are invisible lines in our own life. And it is very important to start this process of creating boundaries from a place of, what are my values, which ultimately are the things that create these invisible lines from being important or not to us. What is important to you? What do you wish was showing up more in a day-to-day life for you? What do you wish was showing up less in day-to-day life for you? There's so many times, and I think especially in this past year when we've all been feeling this very different sense of life and what we can and can't do, our boundaries have been shaken to its core. And that's caused a lot of issues. And for me too, where I don't like having the feeling of being told I can't do something. And right now, travel would be an example for that. I am making the choice right now out of health and safety and respecting the rules and regulations of the world and keeping my family and myself healthy to not get on a plane and travel somewhere warm in the dead of winter. Do I wish I was doing this? Yes, I do. If you follow me on Instagram at Celebrating Simple Life, which if you don't already, I would love to see you over there because I love to continue the conversations of these podcast episodes over on Instagram and to be able to share ideas and to hear what you think about this and to hear different perspectives, which I just find so beneficial to my own life as well. But yeah, please follow me over at Celebrating Simple Life. And I post a lot of memes about traveling and how much I miss travel, and it's all in good fun. But the honest truth is, I really, really miss the feeling of spark and adventure that comes from going somewhere new and being in a new culture and trying new foods and doing new things and just feeling the warmth of the sun and the sand in my toes, or meeting new people and having conversations with people from all over the world. That lights me up. And right now, the fact that that has not been able to happen this past year has been like taking a piece of what brings me joy just out of my life. And I know that that's been that way for so many people in not just travel, but so many other things. And I think that it is so important to know those things about ourselves so that we actually get to define what is important to us and how to actually create boundaries in our life that match what our values are, so that saying yes and no to certain things becomes like breathing. It becomes so easy and habitual that it doesn't have to be something that we have to actually have a intense thought process over, or feelings of guilt and shame and anger and resentment when something doesn't go the way that it goes. It needs to be something that becomes easier. And the only way that things become easier is by practicing them and by actually having experiences where your boundaries are being tested in order to actually test yourself on how you respond to them. And we've talked about this many times before on the podcast, just about how ironic it is that in situations when you're wanting to be better at something, whether it's a physical skill of learning something, whether it's managing your emotions, creating boundaries like we're talking about today, all of the things, when you want to be better at something, the only way to become better is to put in the time of actually focusing on the things that you want to be better on. If it's a physical skill, it means taking the courses, watching the videos, going through the tutorials, hiring an expert who has gone before you, who can help speed up the process for you to learn. There's a million ways to do this, and it doesn't matter what way it is for you, but that is the only way to get better. You have to put the time in order to be better at something. And the same goes with communication and creating boundaries. We can't expect that we're going to listen even to this podcast about boundaries and suddenly later today you're going to have a full clear picture on what you're saying yes and no to. The real work is going to start after you listen to this today and you actually spend time putting in the work of deciding what is serving you in your life right now and what isn't serving you in your life. And this doesn't need to be a long exercise. This needs to be, I have found for myself that I have taken moments of time in life where I've actually, sometimes I've even looked through my calendar, for my Google Calendar, for the past few months, even a year. And I heard this tip on Rachel Hollis podcast a while ago, where she does a little bit of an inventory of her own life each year and actually physically looks through her calendar. And I did this past year and it was very enlightening. And now is a really great time to do this as January is wrapping up and we're moving forward. And we now are almost to the point of only having 11 months left in 2021, which January has just flown by. And you look at all of the appointments in your calendar and you just look through and allow yourself to put every appointment that you were involved with this year into a category of something you wish to do more of, or something that you wish wasn't a part of your life. And this doesn't have to be something you show anybody. You can be as honest as you want. Was meeting up with this person for a 2-hour coffee good for you? Was it not a good experience, but you pretended it felt good? Did you pretend you were on the same page while you were having coffee and they wanted to do something and you actually didn't want to do that, but you agreed just because maybe you were flattered that they asked you, but you really weren't sure if it was quite a match to do a project or collab or business thing together? That's fair. It doesn't have to work for you just because it is presented to you. And go through your calendar, look through your meetings, your appointments, your social activities, your work engagements, the webinars you've signed up for, the activities you have your children in, all of it. Just take even an hour and go through your calendar and make a little bit of an inventory, and you are going to be blown away, first of all, with all of the things that you fit into your life in a year. And secondly, you are going to be blown away by the feeling that comes over you when you actually are putting these things into categories versus telling yourself this is something you should be doing. And This right here is just another way to sort of help figure out what your values are. What are your values and what is important to you? Where do you wish to be spending your time? Where do you wish to be investing in? Who are the people that you want to be spending your time with? Who do you want to have speaking into your life? What activities in your current job, in your business, in your life are serving you and what isn't? And you get to be the person who decides what is there or what isn't there. And maybe there's certain things that come up that you do feel in your job have to be there to a certain degree, but maybe there's a better way to do them, or maybe there's a more creative way to do them. Maybe someone can come alongside and support you in that and turn it into something that doesn't have to feel boring or monotonous. Whatever the case may be, there is always a way to reposition something in order for it to serve you better, in order to stop stripping down these death by 1,000 paper cuts, I'll call it, where I think a lot of us don't realize how many things are showing up in our day-to-day life, little things that we sometimes are not even paying attention to, but things that are not serving us and things that don't necessarily feel good, but they are so hairline fractures that we don't actually notice it turning in to breaking our spirit and breaking part of us. And to the point where we wake up one day and there's so many things that are a part of our world and a part of our life that we wish weren't there. And we can't see how it got like this. How did I get to this point? How do I live my life in a way that feels intentional and authentic to myself when there's so many things that are showing up that I wish weren't there? And it starts with one by one going through your values and figuring out what is important to you. And if you Google how to come up with my personal values, there is just endless articles that can sort of just help this process if this feels confusing to you on how to even get started. And I know getting started on this is sometimes the hardest part for a lot of people. It feels daunting to fix these things. And that's how we kind of generally stay in these unproductive patterns, is we feel like we don't have the energy to take the baby steps necessary because we want it fixed tomorrow. We want to be really good at things tomorrow. And I am allowed to say this because that is me to a T. However, I have been challenging myself in the wildest ways in the past few years of taking on things that feel incredibly daunting and turning it into baby steps and challenging myself to be okay with the uncomfortableness that comes from not having it figured out right away. I don't like it. I don't like the feeling of not having something figured out right away. That process is painful. It doesn't feel good. It's uncomfortable. I doubt myself. I tell myself stories in my head about the fact that other people are doing this way faster than I am. They're way better at this. They have it all figured out. Why can't I have this all figured out? And it really is the journey of figuring these things out. It is the baby steps and the piece by piece that gets us to a place of changing our mindset on what is possible for our own life. I'll get back to the show in just a moment, but I wanted to let you in on something really special. Just like you, I value my health and am so grateful for the team at Holistic Physiotherapy and Wellness right here in Saskatoon. Not only do they have an incredible clinic, but also offer telehealth virtual appointment options for anyone across Saskatchewan. I have had virtual physio and naturopathic appointments in these last few months, and they have been game changers for me, all from the comfort of my own home. And right now they are offering 10% off any Pilates package and subscription, in person and online, with unlimited use from right now in January until the end of March. And as a listener of Celebrating Simple Life, the podcast, you can also receive $10 off any of their core health services, in person or virtual telehealth. They have naturopathic medicine, chiropractic, physiotherapy, pelvic floor physiotherapy, massage therapy, yoga therapy. Book online today at holisticphysiowellness.ca and use the code CELEBRATE10, or you can call the clinic at 306-373-0060, because this is your year to take care of you and feel your best. So now that we have talked about our values and figuring out how to come up with those, we need to dive further into boundaries, a line that marks the limit of an area. What are the boundaries in your own life? Did you know that the purpose of a boundary is to actually take care of you? And I think this is just a piece that just so often gets missed in the idea of what a boundary is. I'm going to repeat that again for those in the back because I need to hear things twice, often more, in order for it to sink in. The purpose of a boundary is to take care of you. If taking care of yourself is stirring up feelings of guilt and uncomfortableness right now, this is a sure sign that you need to do this work, because taking care of yourself is a message that needs to be screamed from the rooftops. This is not okay to not take care of yourself. And if you are not okay with taking care of yourself, you will not be okay or able in a healthy way to take care of the people around you, your family, your friends, your colleagues, people in your world that need you to show up as your best self are not going to see the best you if you have not put in the work to take care of yourself first. Boundaries don't have to mean that you are rigid or that you are too loose and easygoing. There is a range of boundaries, just like there is a range of personalities and people. Your boundaries have to suit you. There is no right or wrong way to have your own boundaries, but your boundaries are essentially your rules, deal breakers, life lessons. Your boundaries means that you are holding yourself to a standard that works best for you while you create your identity and show up as you in the world. Now, like we talked about before, boundaries can be actual physical limits. For example, I am not going to answer my phone, or maybe even take it as far as looking at my phone between the hours of 9 p.m. and 9 a.m. That is a boundary that can be set. I personally, years ago already, set a boundary for myself where I turned off all of the alerts on my phone that make a sound. Besides my phone actually ringing, I have no alerts. I do not get alerts when I get a text. I do not get alerts when I receive an email, a Hangouts message, an Instagram message, all the possible places that your phone can beep and ding and buzz and alert you do not happen on my phone. I do have the little red circle badges that show up when there is something new so that I can stay organized and on top of what needs to be staying on top of. But that was a boundary that I set for myself after years of never having my phone off, to the point where the sound of the email ding coming in would actually feel like a trigger to me, where my back would go up. I would get anxious. I would get this feeling in the pit of my stomach, wondering what that email was going to say, and like being almost nervous to look at it because I was just dealing with way too much in my life and was not in a healthy place of being able to respond in a healthy way that served me. And I felt like that meant when I received an email or a text that I immediately had to react, and it meant somebody needed something more of me. Is this familiar for you? Because it took me a long time, and I have never switched back to having these alerts come on. It's a way for me to self-protect, and that does not mean that I need to control when people reach out to me. I don't need to say, hey, would you please not text me at 11 p.m. because it wakes me up? No, I cannot control what anybody else does in this situation, but I can control my response to it. So by Having my phone off at a certain time and on at a certain time and the alerts in between and checking it when I choose, it allows me to be in control of my own schedule and not allowing what's coming in to feel like it needs to be an emergency for me to react just because somebody else has reached out to me on something. They get to set up their schedule on their own time. And if 11 p.m. is a convenient time for them to send an email, that's perfectly fair because that's what they feel works best for them. However, if you are in a situation where you have had a conversation with somebody where you are saying, hey, I'm trying really hard to look at my phone less. I'm wondering if you would be able to not text me after 10 p.m. I'm struggling to look at my phone, to not look at my phone. And when I see a message come in, I want to look at it, but I know that then I'm not going to be able to sleep because I'm going to be thinking about it. That is a whole nother way for you to ask somebody around you. But what you have to be aware of is that you cannot control whether that works for them or not. It's okay if they say, you know what, 11 p.m. is the only time that I actually am able to catch up on my emails and texts in a day. So if it's okay with you, I'm just going to keep doing that. Maybe you should power off your phone. And that could very well be how the conversation goes. But there is a difference between having a conversation that is assertive versus aggressive. And I think all too often, those things get meshed up a little bit and we either feel like, well, I don't want to be aggressive with this person, so I shouldn't ask for what I need. When the difference is being assertive and honest about what isn't working for you is another one of those things where nobody around you can ever know what it is that you are thinking. You have to speak words out loud in order for somebody else to know what is going on inside your mind. And that right there is how healthy boundaries can be formed. So you can, for the people that are closest to you and that you have relationships with and that you want deeper connections with, you can say to those people, hey, this is something that I'm going through right now. This is something that would really work well for me. Is this something that you think would be okay for you to help me with? And you can use the example of the hours on your phone. You could use the example of, hey, I would really appreciate it if you would text me before you popped over to my house. And if I don't respond, that means it's not a good time for you to pop over or leave something for me. And that's something that I would really appreciate if you respected, because it's making me feel like I'm not respected when I've asked you this a few times before and you choose to do it anyways. Is there a reason why you're choosing to do this, even though I've asked for this to stop? Boundaries don't have to be something big. I think we make these out to be in our mind something where it has to be a life-changing thing in order for it to be called a boundary. And there are boundaries. Okay, when you're in a relationship with somebody, there can be big boundaries. Infidelity is not okay. This is not okay. Doing drugs is not okay. There are big lifestyle boundaries that can be moral and personal choices of what does and doesn't work for you in the relationships that you have in your life. That is also an example of a boundary. But boundaries also show up in a lot of really little small ways where it doesn't have to be a full-on moral dilemma in order for it to be called a boundary. It can be something as small as, please text me before you show up. And if that doesn't work, if somebody isn't able to follow through on that boundary where they show up anyways, they knock on your door or ring your doorbell, you do not need to answer. If you feel like you have been as clear as you possibly can, and this is the key, because if you have not been clear, then you cannot be upset about this happening. But if you have been as clear as you possibly can, and the person has decided to do this anyways, even though you feel that you have communicated this to them, it is not your responsibility to fix this. And it is not your responsibility to be available because they feel that this works for them if you don't feel it's working for you. And there are a lot of examples of being able to lay out clear expectations of what you will and will not tolerate. And you just need to look into your own life. Look into this past week. What are some things that have happened to you that have triggered you? Or something that has happened that didn't feel good? How did you feel when your phone rang and this number showed up? How did you feel when you received an email from your colleague asking you to do something that you knew wasn't actually supposed to be a part of your job description? How did you feel when you received a comment on one of your social posts of somebody saying something that triggered you? How did you feel about those things? Where are the ways that you can show up better in order for these things to stop feeling like personal attacks towards yourself and feeling like you have the ability to honestly and assertively be able to speak up and say what you need? A boundary means taking care of your mental health, your physical health, avoiding burnout. A boundary is not getting mad at somebody for not following your boundary. And this is where things I think get a little hazy sometimes. Everybody has their own set of boundaries, whether you have taken the time to actually define them the way we're talking about today, or they're just sort of floating around in your mind of things that you are and are not okay with. We cannot be frustrated at somebody else for not being able to follow our boundaries, but we can be clear about it. A boundary is not feeling like you need or have to do something to help somebody else, even if you are able and know how. But if you are not in a space of feeling like you have the emotional, physical, or mental capabilities of doing that in that moment, it is okay to say no. Boundaries actually allow problems to be prevented in the future, even if it is hard right now to tackle them head on. And I think that that's where the cycle continues sometimes. There are instant moments where we feel, oh, this is just going to be easier if I just keep the peace and do what this person is needing me to do for them, rather than actually saying, sorry, I don't have time right now to help you out. I really wish that I could. I hope you get this sorted out because I know how important this is to you. That's okay. And it is not your responsibility to fix somebody else's problem or to assume responsibility for what their reaction might be if they don't get their way of something they have asked of you. Your mental health, your physical health, your time, your energy comes first. And I don't say that in a way that comes across as selfish. And I think that is a line where being selfless and giving to others gets blurry, because all of us who are wanting to show up in the most authentic way possible are most likely also wanting to show up in a world where we are able to help others and give back and show up where we can. And I believe that we are able to do that quadruply more if we are healthy first. And if we are in a place where our bucket is full and we have overflow to give to our people and our families and organizations that need us and causes that are near and dear to our heart and communities that need help rebuilding. But we cannot show up in a place of frustration and resentment and I'm already burnt out and overwhelmed, but I'm giving of myself anyways. That is never going to lead to a healthy, better place for that organization or people you're helping or people you're showing up for, and especially not for yourself. So dealing with these boundaries in the moment when a situation presents itself and working on yourself first so that you feel equipped. When something shows up, which it will, I promise you this, when you start doing these exercises and actually figuring out for yourself what does and doesn't work for you, and you're actually honest to yourself about that, that day and the next day and the day that follows and the day that follows that, there are going to be scenarios that you are going to be well more aware of, and they are going to come to your attention, and it is going to feel even harder, and you are going to question why you went through all of these exercises and why you went through the idea of coming up with what your values and your boundaries are, because it's going to feel really hard. But it's not going to feel harder than what you're currently doing in just treading water and feeling like every time a scenario comes up, you are floundering to try to figure out what to say or what to do and how to respond and how to react in a way that keeps the peace. That isn't easy either. And if you are treading that water, which is water that I have treaded so many times, and it comes in waves, and I realize I have to press reset and come back to basics and do another evaluation of what is important to me and what my values are and what my lines are. Examples of this can be things that show up in our everyday life. Just telling your partner that you need help is an example of a boundary. It's not thinking and overthinking things in your head about how your partner isn't doing this and isn't doing that, and they're just not helping you where you need them to, and how could they not know that this is something I need them to do for me? It means identifying what is overwhelming you and what is making you feel like you are not showing up in the best way, and being able to verbalize that to your partner in an assertive but kind, compassionate way that isn't attacking or coming up aggressive. It's saying, hey, I'm struggling here. I need you to know that when you told me that you were going to clean up the kitchen and I took your word that this was something you were able to do, I need you to know that that gave me a huge sense of relief, and it made me feel so taken care of that you said you were going to do this. But when I woke up the next morning and there were still crumbs all over the counter and dishes beside the sink from the night before, and only the job had been partially done, that made me feel really let down. And I want you to know that when you say something to me, I really trust you, and I don't want that to change. I want to be able to trust you and to know that when you're telling me something, which essentially is a promise, that I'm taking your word on that. And whether they should be or not, my feelings feel hurt. My feelings feel hurt because I now feel like I am going to go and fix this, and I'm going to finish cleaning up the kitchen, and then I'm going to be resentful about the fact that I spent my time doing something that I was promised was going to get done. So can we talk about this and figure out how this doesn't need to happen again? Because I don't want to feel this way towards you. This doesn't feel good. And that can be a scenario that you can use with absolutely anything in your life. And it doesn't have to be a big deal. It can be super one sentence things that show up. It doesn't have to be a big, huge conversation, but telling someone that you need help, not answering your phone when you are in the middle of something else, saying no to something that comes your way even though you feel like you should say yes, but you actually don't feel like you're in a space to give your best? Celebrating Simple Life, the podcast, is a proud member of the Saskatchewan Podcast Network, sponsored by Sask Energy. Protect your family and your home from carbon monoxide poisoning. We make sure our house has a carbon monoxide detector on every floor of our home. We have even taken it a step further and kept a note in our calendar so that we remind ourselves to test the batteries and make sure that it is working properly. Check your vents and chimney regularly for debris. If you think your home has carbon monoxide, leave your home immediately or call 911 or your local fire department. Go online to saskenergy.com for more information to keep your home and family safe. It shows respect for yourself when you are honest and authentic to yourself about what you need and what you don't need in every single moment. People notice this. I have such high respect for people that I know have fiercely strong boundaries. And I never look to those things as, oh wow, those are really rigid rules and regulations. I look to those things as, wow, they have their shit figured out. They actually have the confidence and the respect for themselves to know what serves them and what doesn't serve them. And they aren't afraid to share that because they're not afraid of taking care of themselves. And that shouldn't be something that we are afraid to do. And sometimes I think we're more anxious about the confrontation or the reaction that might come up by standing up for something for ourselves. And that's another topic as well, of learning how to respond in a way that doesn't have to feel like conflict. Because yeah, a lot of times boundaries can be solved really simply, but it's the tone of voice and the aggressive attitude and the conflict that kind of comes up that makes a situation feel like conflict when really it could have just been handled assertively and it didn't need to be coming in as an attack. Attack tone, defensiveness is what turns a assertive conversation into a conflict conversation. And I think this begins with us also teaching our children. This is something that I don't feel was a part of the conversation growing up when I was little. It felt like it was better to sweep things under the rug than to have assertive conversation because that was always attributed as conflict. And we are trying to avoid conflict to all costs rather than feeling like having an assertive conversation. And by assertive, I don't mean aggressive. Those are two separate terms that often get lumped in. By assertive, I mean honest, an honest conversation about what you are feeling. And when you are speaking about what you are feeling, rather than saying, you made me feel this way to somebody else, that's attacking. Nobody can make you feel any way. They might have done something that felt offensive or something that you preferred wouldn't have happened, of course. But nobody can make you feel any way. You get to control how things make you feel and whether you have the ability to let it run off your back or whether it involves a conversation, if it is coming up as a feeling of not feeling good for you. And if you are able to get yourself to a place where you can bring these conversations up in a way that are honest and true to yourself, gentle, kind, not attacking anybody else, just letting somebody know how you feel about something that happened is different than creating conflict. And I have had these conversations with my two daughters regularly because they're growing up, they're communicating with friends, they're communicating with me, they're communicating with their dad. And those are all relationships that they are learning at this young age already as to what is expected of them. And we have conversations often when they have said something to me and I can tell that they are maybe saying what they think I want to hear versus what I know is probably their preference in a situation. And I've started challenging them on this and saying to them, hey, are you actually feeling this way right now? Or are you feeling like you think I might be upset with you if you say X, Y, or Z? And often they'll be able to say to me, no, I actually feel this way and I'm being honest with you. And on the flip of the coin, they have often said, yeah, the last time I talked to you about this, you got a little upset with me and I didn't like that. So I'm feeling hesitant to say this to you right now because I don't want you to be upset, but I also don't feel like having an argument. And so I'm saying this. So then I will challenge it back and say to them, I'm really sorry that the last time you brought your feelings up to me, I didn't react in a way that made you feel safe. I'm sorry that I let my reaction and my immediate jump to conclusions or stern voice or anger cloud the fact that you were actually being brave and sharing your feelings with me, and that isn't a response that you deserved. Your comments to me did trigger me. I am only human, even though I'm your mom and you think I'm a superhero, which I hope never changes, you guys. But I'm sorry that I reacted in a way that made you feel not safe, period. That is the bottom line as to why people choose to not be honest in conversations. Because either A, history has proven itself that this person reacts in this way most of the time, therefore this is not a safe person to talk to about honest feelings. Or B, I'm just scared because I haven't ever actually had an honest conversation with you before, and I don't know what your reaction is going to be. And my mind immediately goes to the fact that it could be negative. And I think being able to show up more positively and actually talking through these feelings has allowed me to be able to start a new generation with my own kids, because that's the only two people I'm raising in this world and having these honest conversations with. And I think we can all do that in our own circles, is have the honest conversations to know that communication is a safe space. And regardless of whether you agree or disagree on a topic isn't the point. The point is that you get to say how you're feeling, no judgments. And you can't control how something makes you feel, and you should be able to verbalize that to the people that you are closest with. So being able to figure out what you can do in order to reconnect with yourself, in order to make yourself feel like you are flourishing and living your life in the best way possible, is where you get to go from here. How are you going to spend time with yourself this week in coming up with values and boundaries and invisible lines in the sand that work and don't work for you where you are right now in your life? I would absolutely love to hear what this has brought up for you and what you have been challenged with. If you want to comment below on the Instagram and Facebook post of this episode and write your thoughts. If you would rather comment right in the podcast episode on celebratingsimplelife.com. If you would like to send me a DM or connect through my website and send me a message and continue this conversation, I would be happy to, because this is the purpose and the point of bringing these topics to light so that we can all just take an inward look. And I know I sure am going to be reflecting on this week as well, and really saying, where am I at right now? What is working and what isn't working for me? And how do I take these things and lead them into the places of joy and having fun and lightness in my own life? Thank you so much for tuning in today to Celebrating Simple Life, the podcast. Your following along and your shares on Instagram and on your Facebook and comments are honestly the pieces that are helping this podcast grow. And we are a big community, you guys. And I am so grateful that I get to be a part of this with you and learn and grow right alongside you. This show would not be possible without you, my incredible listeners. It would mean the world to me if you would subscribe to Celebrating Simple Life on Apple Podcasts or download and listen on Spotify, Google Podcasts, or wherever you choose to listen. If you really want to make my day, leave a review. These reviews, ratings, and sharing screenshots of podcast episodes that were engaging for you on your Instagram stories and tagging friends that you think should hear the episode too really helps the podcast grow. It makes me so happy that I often select reviews to read on the show, and if yours is chosen, you will receive a special gift from me. Thank you for being a part of my mission to connect stories of business and life. Cheers to Celebrating Simple Life.